My most anticipated game of the year finally came out a few weeks ago, and I was so unbelievably excited for this game, and for the most part I really enjoyed it. But it does have problems that I feel some people are overlooking or flat out blindly defending. But this is a positive channel. We celebrate video games over here, so we're going to start off with what this game did right, because the highs of this game are so unbelievably high. The most obvious credit to this game is that it is stunning. Final Fantasy XVI is jaw-droppingly beautiful. I was continuously blown away each time I arrived at a new area, because the environments are just gorgeous. It's truly such an awesome world to be a part of. You also can't fault the general direction of the game. Whilst there are a lot of cutscenes, they're mostly quite strong cutscenes, especially the ones in climactic moments such as boss battles or story revelations. Speaking of boss battles, that is where the game really shines the most. The sheer spectacle on show in almost all of these fights is just off the charts. You're glued to the screen. There are specific fights that just take all of this to a whole new level. I was always craving another boss battle because they're just so fun. When this game wants to be good, it's utterly exceptional. The high points are just so damn high, and those moments are usually in the midst of a climactic duel with a boss. At times, Final Fantasy XVI is everything you want in a video game. We also can't ignore the soundtrack. What on earth were they cooking here? This is just insane. Every time I hear those trumpets blaring, I just get even more hyped for whatever is occurring on screen. They do reuse quite a lot of tracks, but it didn't bother me too much because they do absolutely slap. Phenomenal soundtrack. The combat is also incredible. At least I really enjoyed it. It really does flow nicely. There's a ludicrous amount of abilities to choose from, to the point where I'm kinda disappointed that you only get 3 ability wheels to switch between on the fly. I would have much preferred 4, because there are so many combos to experiment with here, and experimenting with them is where a lot of the fun came from for me. For example, I would always use Ignition at the start of battles to thin out the herd, but the player agency in terms of choosing whichever combination of abilities works best for you is really impressive. But then, for the flaws this game has, and I have to say that the undertone to pretty much all of this is the up and down pacing. It's very stop-start, and that is a problem. I'll speak more about pacing a bit later on, so you'll have to hear me out, but first, the story. I'm so conflicted on this story because there were things I really liked, but I just think it has too many issues to be considered great. The heart of every Final Fantasy story is the characters, and the characters in this game are fine, but that's kind of it for me. I really liked Clive. Clive is easily the best character in this game. His motivations and development throughout the events of the game is where the story peaks the most.
They were admired and exalted, not spurned.
I also really like Jill. Her role at the start of the game and her growth into helping you achieve your goal, it's great, and her relationship with Clive is a brilliant spark to watch blossom, with a lovely culmination at the end. But other than that, I really struggled to connect with many of the other characters. I cared about the characters in the game, but the story is told in such a slow-cooked way that I floundered to remain fully engaged in the wider narrative. And this is an issue derived purely from the pacing. As I mentioned earlier, the boss fights and climaxes of the game are incredible, but following those battles, you will then almost always be put into 20 to 30 minutes of walking around the hideaway, talking to people, watching slow-paced cutscenes, before 40 minutes to an hour's worth of mandatory side quest quality missions. I have no problem with cutscenes are fine, but being on that 200% adrenaline high and then immediately being dragged down to 10% talking is really jarring, and it was my biggest issue with the game, and subsequently affected my enjoyment of the story. Let's also not forget this story seems to completely switch up its focus completely on the turn of a knife. The opening few hours are a personal tale of loss and a thirst for the truth, before the story takes a deep dive into the political landscape of the world, before finally culminating in the typical save the world gimmick that every JRPG devolves into in its final act. There's also been a lot of discussion around side quests in this game, and I can see both viewpoints, but how anyone can claim that most of these side quests are anything more than fine is quite confusing to me. The vast majority of them are so one-dimensional that I was questioning why I was even doing them. I was doing them because it's world building, obviously, and world building is obviously important, especially in a game set in a world as politically complex as this one. But it still needs to be fun, and I just didn't find many of these fun. There are a few that do stand out, they aren't all bad, but these strong side quests are 100% diamonds in the rough compared to the overwhelming void of monotony present in the rest. Given how often the main quest promptly grinds to a complete halt, I just couldn't bring myself to disrupt the pacing any more than the game already had. I'm not saying you're not allowed to enjoy them, I don't decide what you find fun. If you enjoyed them, good for you. I am incredibly happy for you. I'm over the moon, really. I just didn't. Also, the lack of RPG mechanics was quite disappointing. I don't agree with the statement that it doesn't feel like Final Fantasy, because it does. It's different, but it's unquestionably still Final Fantasy. But this ain't an RPG. The lack of status effects is baffling. If you've played any other Final Fantasy game before, it should feel weird to you that you can use fire attacks on fire-based enemies. The biggest problem with this is that classic Final Fantasy enemies that used to be a monumental challenge become nothing more than another obstacle in the road. You can't be poisoned or perished or anything like that. The Marlboro in this game is a complete joke, for example. Easily telegraphed attacks, no fear of being poisoned. What's even the point? You don't get to make any decisions either. The only weapon choices are which do the most damage. All your stats upgrade automatically with each level up. This game is just not an RPG. It's an open world action adventure hack and slash, which is fine. It's still good, but it's not an RPG, so there's no use in pretending otherwise. There can be a whole load of discussion about what makes an RPG, as in what is the strict definition, but to me, this is not an RPG, which is fine. I understand this video has become a little bit ranty, but I'm just trying to articulate the issues I feel this game has in as clear a format as possible. I really enjoyed this game, the combat is undeniably enjoyable, and the world is so deep and beautiful. The spectacle is otherworldly, and the main characters are interesting people. But it does have problems, and pretending they don't exist because of hype or blind fandom is disingenuous. What do you think of Final Fantasy XVI? Please let me know in the comments, because this game provides a lot of enjoyable discussion, but for now, that's all from me. If you enjoyed the video, then please consider leaving a like, so that would really help me out, and if you want to see more videos from me, then you can always subscribe. But that's all. Have a nice day.
How many people have you killed? How many dreams have you crushed? You're not the only one who's seen their world fall apart around them.